Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath the soft murmur of rain, the windows fog, the fan hums, and the gutters outside are already overflowing like someone left the heavens running. You're lying there, still but not yet asleep, and the sky is doing what it does best, telling stories in the form of thunder, patter, and distant rumble. Rain has always been good at that. You probably won't survive this cozy descent into stormy fairy tales without your pillow becoming a little damp. From dew or dreams, who's to say? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling social, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the sound. Not the loud thunderclap, not yet. Just that low, constant whisper of water on rooftops, like parchment being gently rubbed or fingers brushing silk. It's a sound you've known forever. Your ancestors heard it too, pressed into damp cave walls or peeking through straw rooftops. And somehow, every culture, every generation, turned that sound into something, into warnings, into poems, into lullabies. The rain begins slowly tonight, steady, rhythmic, a lullaby in Morse code. You stare up at the ceiling, but what you really see are memories, candlelight flickering against a dark window pane, steam rising from a chipped teacup, the soft scratch of a quill against paper. That last one, it's not your memory, it's older. Someone, maybe in 17th century France, is writing something down during a storm, right now, just as you're listening. It's a tale, and it begins, as these things often do, with a man on a muddy road. He's a merchant. You know, the kind who trades silks or sugar and gets dramatically shipwrecked at least once per month. He's soaked to the bone. You can practically feel the squish in his boots. His beard drips. His horse wants to mutiny. And just as you think he's about to turn into one of those "a skeleton was later found by the roadside" types, he sees it, glowing faintly in the storm like a mirage. A castle, middle of nowhere, lit up like someone forgot the power bill doesn't exist in enchanted realms. This is where we begin. You might remember Beauty and the Beast as a Disney musical or a little golden book, but the original version is darker, stranger, and absolutely soaked in water. The first written form of the tale dates to the mid-1700s by a woman named Gabrielle Suzanne de Villeneuve. She penned a sprawling, dreamy novel while the salons of Paris buzzed with Enlightenment chatter and Baroque gossip. And while the Versailles elite were busy wearing powdered wigs and ignoring their peasants, Villeneuve wrote about curses, kindness, and castles that seemed to breathe. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The merchant's only crime, you'll recall, was picking a rose. Not jewels, not gold, just a single rose for one of his many daughters, the kind who politely ask for something simple and somehow curse the entire family with that exact request. That's just how fairy tales work. And that moment, that's when the beast appears. You don't see him yet, not fully. He's still just a roar in the shadows, a blur at the edge of lightning. And the rain, it keeps falling, all the time. Fairy tales don't care about meteorological realism. They want atmosphere, and atmosphere is damp. Historians still argue whether the story of Beauty and the Beast stems from Cupid and Psyche, from medieval chivalric tales, or from something even older. Those ancient transformation myths where humans marry monsters and discover truths more profound than appearances. There are versions from India, from Scandinavia, from ancient Greece, and in nearly every one, there's weather, storms, doors opening when you least expect them. Here's the quirky bit. In the 18th century, stormy nights weren't just narrative flair, they were scientific drama. People believed that strong thunderstorms could affect your mood, your humors, even your sanity. Physicians warned about vapors of melancholy stirred by heavy air pressure. So when Beauty's father walks into a castle soaked with sorrow and dread, that wasn't just a plot device, it was a medical risk. The merchant stumbles into the castle, dripping, disoriented, expecting danger, but instead he finds warmth. A fire burning, a table set, dry clothes waiting. No host, no servants, just hospitality without a face. It's eerie and comforting, like someone has been waiting for him all along. You shift slightly beneath your blanket. Maybe you imagine a world like that, a place where you're welcomed, even in your most pitiful state. Rain clinging to your eyelashes, socks wet enough to squish, and still, someone has prepared a chair by the fire. Before long, the merchant will leave, rose in hand, fate trailing him like a sodden cloak. And Beauty, she doesn't yet know that her future involves candlelit dinners with a beast and moonlit strolls in a magical garden. But already, the storm is telling the story. The ceiling above you creaks softly. Maybe it's the wind. Or maybe, just maybe, the castle isn't that far away after all. The storm hasn't let up. If anything, it deepens. Long, rolling thunder like furniture being dragged across the sky. You're still there, nestled under your blanket. But your mind has traveled far down that muddy road and through the great arched gates of the castle. The merchant is gone now, galloping home with guilt riding double behind him. And in his place stands Beauty. She's not trembling. She's curious. Beauty isn't a scream and swoon kind of girl. She grew up reading, asking odd questions, tending plants in corners her sisters found too damp. And now she walks, barefoot on the marble, rain still trickling down from her cloak, into a palace that seems to breathe. A place with walls that sigh and chandeliers that never gather dust. This is where the story shifts from danger to something quieter, something more haunted than horrifying. The beast appears again, not in a jump scare, not with snarls. No, he simply is. Large, yes. Animal-shaped, vaguely leonine, or maybe bearish, depending on the version you're hearing. He isn't just beastly in body. He's weighted by sorrow, like he's been underwater for years. There's a heaviness in his voice when he asks her to stay, not because he demands it, but because he hopes she might choose to. And she does. For her father's life, for her own curiosity, and, let's be honest, because it's raining and she doesn't have a better option. You've probably noticed this already, but Beauty's castle? It's really deeply weird. The furniture talks. The mirrors answer questions. The curtains breathe. None of this alarms her. In fact, she adapts rather quickly, because in fairy tales, the strange often disguises the safe, and the familiar is where the real danger lives. You wander with her now through the halls, pausing at the grand staircase where candles light themselves one by one. The portraits watch, but not creepily. More like doting grandparents mildly concerned about your posture. Somewhere, a harp is playing itself, not loud, just enough to keep you from hearing your own footsteps. There's something else, too. No people. No maids, no cooks, no guards, just presence. magic without witnesses. Historians still argue whether enchanted furniture represents servitude or solace. In 18th century France, objects were already being elevated into status symbols: ornate clocks, embroidered footstools, tea sets with their own reputations. The idea that these things might speak was both delightful and deeply unsettling to audiences who were just beginning to question who or what was truly in control of the house. But here's a fringe fact for your sleepy mind. In European folklore, there was a common belief that household spirits lived inside everyday objects. Not just ghosts, but helpers. A slipper that always stayed warm, a broom that swept a little too well. Some people even named their tools, whispering gratitude into their handles so they wouldn't turn on them. Beauty's castle isn't unique. It's just exaggerated, dreamlike, a world where the cozy has grown claws. Still, you sense something beneath the plush rugs and golden goblets: loneliness. The beast is always watching, though not in a sinister way. More like someone hoping you'll finally notice he's still at the table. Every evening, he joins Beauty for dinner. He doesn't eat much, just watches her, asks her a question every night. Will you marry me? Every night she declines, but not cruelly. She simply isn't ready to say yes to someone whose face she still doesn't understand. You get the sense he already knows her answer, but he asks anyway. Like a ritual, like saying grace. Outside, it still rains. Always rains. That's the mood of the tale now. Slow and steady. A castle held inside a raindrop. You wander the library, where the shelves stretch too high to be real. She reads stories that haven't been written yet. Dreams of gardens that bloom under moonlight. This is no prison, but it is a waiting room. And what exactly are they both waiting for? Here's a theory no one asked for, but you're getting anyway. Maybe the beast is just a metaphor for time, for the way loneliness turns us inward, distorts our faces, grows hair where hope used to be. And maybe beauty is what happens when someone sees through all that and doesn't flinch. Now, back to something solid. In one version of the tale, older than Disney, older even than Villeneuve's, Beauty isn't the youngest daughter. She's the middle one, and the beast isn't cursed by a fairy. He is a fairy, a fey creature, cursed by his own kind for falling in love with a mortal. And the castle, it's a spell held together by his sadness. The moment he's happy, it might vanish. You don't hear that version much these days. Too fragile, too complicated. But it's lovely, isn't it? This idea that the world you live in exists only because someone wishes you well enough to sustain it. Tonight, Beauty sleeps alone in her lavish room. The curtains are velvet. The sheets are too smooth to hold on to. Outside, thunder murmurs like a bedtime story half remembered. You lie there with her, listening, waiting, wondering what kind of creature would build a home so strange and then wait centuries for someone kind enough to knock. The next morning doesn't begin with sunlight. In this castle, mornings arrive as a slow thinning of shadow, the soft click of dew collecting on window panes, the gentle shush of rain as it begins to fall. Again. It's always raining here, remember? Not violently, not even insistently, just eternally, like a lullaby with no end. You stretch a little beneath your blanket, and Beauty does too, beneath embroidered sheets that smell faintly of lavender and old paper. The mirror shows her a version of herself with sleep-soft eyes, and for a moment she wonders if she dreamt the beast, the dinner, the library with the ceiling too high to reach even with the wildest ambition. She didn't. The beast appears that night again, just as the first flicker of candlelight begins its dance along the long hall. He doesn't speak much. He never does. But this time, he tells her a story, not with words, but with silence and glances, and the kind of pauses that make you lean closer without realizing. It's about a woman, or maybe a fairy, maybe both. She appeared long ago, disguised as a beggar, hunched and soaked through with rain, just like the merchant had been. Only this time, she asked for shelter. The man, young, rich, beautiful, in the way mirrors liked, refused her. Not rudely, just dismissively, like swatting away a cobweb that dares hang in the wrong part of the chandelier. That was his mistake. Historians still argue whether this part of the story reflects the Christian allegory of humility or a more folkloric warning about testing hospitality, especially toward those who appear poor or strange. In either case, the result is the same. The woman revealed her true form, not a beggar at all, but radiant and terrible and furious in a way only old magic can be. She cursed the man, turning him into something that reflected what he had become, beastly. Not because he was cruel, but because he had grown careless. Which brings us to something interesting. In fairy tales, curses rarely match the crime. They exaggerate it. You don't just get a slap on the wrist for being rude, you get turned into a bison wolf lion thing for centuries. That's not justice. That's storytelling. Here's your quirky historical tidbit. In early modern Europe, curses weren't just fantasy. People genuinely feared them. Maleficium wasn't a joke. Entire witch trials spun out of the fear that a woman's dirty look could blight your crops or give your baby colic. There are records of villagers keeping bottles of their own urine under their beds, believing it would trap the witch's magic. Try explaining that to your mattress warranty. So the beast's curse? Totally on brand for the time. You mess up, a powerful woman punishes you, and suddenly your cutlery sings, and your face scares off polite company. But here's where it gets more interesting. The beast doesn't blame her. Not really. He talks about the curse like a weather pattern, like something he earned and endured. It's not vengeance he seeks. It's redemption, though he never names it that way. Beauty listens. She always does. And the rain? It taps lightly at the stained glass above her, like it's eavesdropping too. You imagine her that night walking the halls after dinner, the hem of her gown trailing just above puddles that mysteriously appear and vanish on the floor. She's not scared. She's thinking. The castle, for all its grandeur, isn't trying to impress her. It's waiting, which is worse in some ways. She finds herself in a gallery, not of art, but of memories. Mirrors line the walls, and in them, she doesn't see herself. She sees fragments of other stories. A girl feeding breadcrumbs to birds. A man climbing a beanstalk that trembles in the wind. A spindle dripping red. These are not her memories, but the castle wants her to see them. Fairy tales, after all, are rarely solitary. They share motifs like neighbors swapping recipes, except the ingredients are betrayal, transformation, longing. This tale? It's part of that same soup. You want one more fun little sidetrack before we drift further? In a 13th century French bestiary, there's a description of a mythical creature called the leontophone, a small animal so venomous that even its smell could kill a lion. It was said that lions instinctively hated them, so much so that pregnant lionesses would give birth. Early out of fear. Some scholars suggest that the leontophone was an allegory for guilt, tiny, invisible, lethal. You wonder if the beast had a leontophone once, if something small gnawed at him long before the curse. Maybe he wasn't turned into a monster so much as revealed to be one already forming. Either way, Beauty doesn't flinch. That's her strength. She doesn't try to fix him. She just stays. And that's rarer than roses. The thunder cracks just once tonight, long and low and heavy, like a drum beat from deep underground. Maybe the storm is angry, or maybe it's listening too. And you? You turn slightly in your bed. You wonder what you would do, standing in a castle of sorrows and spells. Would you leave? Would you stay? Would you ask him why he still sets the table for two, even when he knows the answer? Somewhere, very far from here, a beast leans against a doorway, waiting to be told no again, but not yet. Tonight, Beauty walks back to her room. She presses her hand to the cold, rain-speckled window. She doesn't know it yet, but she's already part of the story. And so are you. The next evening comes softly, not with fanfare, but with the hush of rain thickening again outside the high, stained glass windows. The castle doesn't chime hours, it sighs them. And you can tell, just from the shift in the air, that it's nearly dinner time. Beauty doesn't need a clock. The warmth begins blooming from the hearths. The candelabras stretch slightly, flames flickering like they've been waiting to greet her all day. Tonight's meal is quiet. Just the clink of silverware and the gentle murmur of water trickling from invisible fountains somewhere behind the walls. The beast is there too, seated across from her, trying not to seem like he's watching, but failing completely. His plate is untouched. Always is. She once asked why he didn't eat, and he replied simply, "Old curses have odd rules." Then he smiled, barely, like it hurt. You're starting to notice the others now, too. The ones who don't speak with voices. The clock that taps twice when Beauty finishes a sentence. The teacup that spins nervously when the beast enters the room. The armchair that clears its throat when Beauty lingers too long in the doorway. Not literally, of course. These things don't have lungs. But they have presence. They notice. And here's the strange thing. The castle isn't merely enchanted. It's inhabited. Occupied by personalities without bodies. The flatware doesn't just sing. It remembers. The rugs hold memories in their fibers. The paintings shift just slightly when no one is looking, like they're leaning in to hear better. It's not that everything's alive. It's that nothing is fully dead. This sort of magic isn't the sparkling, wand-waving kind. It's the slow, aching spell of objects given too much time and too few visitors. Historians still argue whether these kinds of anthropomorphic details in fairy tales represent ancient animism, where everything in nature was believed to have a spirit, or if it's just a fun metaphor. But in Beauty's world, it's real, and it's lonely. So tonight, she talks to them. Not in words necessarily. She brushes dust from the mantle and hears a whisper of thanks in the flicker of the fire. She leans against a bookshelf, and the spine beneath her shoulders stiffens politely, as if sitting up straighter for her comfort. The castle is beginning to love her, quietly, like the way ivy clings to stone. Now here's your quirky fact of the night. In Slavic folklore, there's a household spirit called the domovoi, a tiny bearded creature who lives behind the stove and protects the home. But he only stays if he feels respected. Insult him, and your milk spoils. Forget to leave him scraps, and your house groans in protest. Some traditions even warned not to sweep toward the door at night, because it might offend the domovoi and drive him out. Sounds ridiculous until you remember your own kitchen groans and pings and hums when no one's there. Beauty doesn't know the names of these spirits, but she feels them. She begins humming as she walks through the halls. Her voice is soft, not trained, just human. And in return, the castle opens. Doors she never noticed before are now slightly ajar. Corridors that once ended in shadow now lead to cozy nooks filled with pillows and books. The more she respects the space, the more it reshapes itself for her comfort. You ever notice that about your own space? That it feels different depending on your mood. When you're anxious, even your blanket seems to turn cold. But when you're calm, like now maybe, the very air feels thicker with warmth. That's not magic. Or maybe it is. In one part of the castle, where even the rain dares not trickle, there's a room filled with mirrors. Not vanity mirrors. Not trick mirrors. Just tall, silver-backed glass panels framed in twisting gold, standing side by side like a silent audience. When beauty steps in, they don't reflect her. She turns away before she can ask too many questions. That night, the beast joins her by the fireplace instead of the dining table. He sits beside her, not across from her, not towering, just beside. He tells her nothing new, no fresh riddles, no confessions, only that she may go anywhere in the castle, that there are no locked doors, that she may leave if she chooses, that all he asks is that she comes to dinner. And, he says, voice thick with something unnameable, that you don't forget me too quickly if you do leave. She doesn't answer. The rain is tapping too loudly on the window for her to think of a response. Here's a thought you're allowed to steal. The line between object and subject, between house and home, is thinner than we think. People pour emotion into spaces. Spaces respond, maybe not in voice, but in vibe. You, lying there now, know what I mean. You felt it in empty rooms, in creaky stairs, in that one chair that always feels like it's waiting for someone who hasn't sat in it yet. Beauty's castle is a place like that. And so tonight, instead of going to bed, she curls up beside the fire. She dozes off mid-page, book sliding down her chest, the hearth humming contentedly nearby. And as the beast watches from the doorway, just far enough to respect her space, you sense that he too is beginning to remember what comfort feels like. Even if it's secondhand, you wake up inside her dream. Or maybe it's your own. Either way, the castle is different now. Quieter, softer, as if it's holding its breath. You're walking through the hallways again. Not your feet, necessarily, but your awareness, your sense of presence. You drift past windows where the rain no longer streaks in harsh lines, but mists gently, like the breath of a sleeping animal. Everything glows faintly blue. Even the beast seems to move slower here, as if he's underwater in his own home. Tonight, beauty begins to see him. Not just the horns, the teeth, the claws carefully hidden by velvet cuffs, but the shape beneath it all. The sadness, the hope, the careful, constant hesitation. He's not the villain of this tale. He's the echo of a man punished not by evil but by years. You sit beside her again at dinner. The plates are there. The food is exquisite. Though who's cooking it remains a mystery. But it's no longer the meal that holds your attention. It's the space between questions, the quiet, the beast, once a figure of dread, now listens more than he speaks. He asks her again, the same question as always. Will you marry me? And she answers, again, no. But this time, there's a pause before she says it. Not hesitation, reflection. She's begun to see him clearly now. And here's where fairy tales get slippery, because what does it mean to see someone? Historians still argue whether the original beast was intended as a metaphor for arranged marriage, how women were expected to look past appearances and find goodness where they had no choice. Others say he represents the raw, masculine wildness tamed by gentle, feminine civility. Neither of those explanations sits quite right. Because this story, it's not about taming, it's about witnessing, and witnessing takes time. Tonight, Beauty asks a question of her own. Were you always like this? The beast doesn't answer right away. His face, what she can see of it in the firelight, tightens, then softens, then simply turns away. No, he says at last. But I wasn't better either. That answer sits between them like another guest at the table. You feel it too. Some memories too thick to unpack, too soggy with regret to unfold in polite conversation. So they don't. Instead, they walk. It's still raining, of course. But now it's gentle. And the corridor they follow leads to a long, arched atrium, glass-roofed, where the moon and clouds play hide and seek above them. The beast says little. Beauty doesn't need him to. Sometimes, in this castle, silence is safer than storytelling. Here's your quirky aside for the night. During the 16th century, French nobles would often commission tapestries not just as decoration, but as conversations. These enormous woven murals would depict stories, biblical, mythological, or personal, and were meant to be read as guests walked past them. Some castles even had seasonal rotation schedules, as if they were mood boards. In Beauty's castle, these tapestries shift when she walks by. Once, she sees one that shows the moment the rose was plucked. Another time, a lion-faced child crying beside a shattered mirror. The house remembers everything. She doesn't press the beast for more details. She doesn't demand to know what he was like before, or how long he's been like this, or who else might have dined at that table and refused him. Maybe it's kindness. Maybe it's fear. But tonight, she speaks honestly. About herself. About how she always felt out of place. Not quite pretty enough for the world's expectations. Not quite clever enough to escape them. About how people only praised her for being good, which is the least interesting compliment a person can receive. How she never believed someone could see her, not just admire her, but actually see her, unless she disappeared completely first. The beast listens, as he always does. You are not what I expected, he says. She replies, without smiling, neither are you. The rain patters gently on the glass above. Somewhere, far off in the house, a piano plays itself. And you, wrapped up now more in their silences than in their words, start to realize what's happening. This isn't about love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It's about recognition. They are both broken, in ways that don't match. But they share the same rhythm of hurt. And here, in this breathing house filled with watchful chairs and whispering wallpaper, that's enough to keep them orbiting each other. Not as captor and captive, not even as beast and beauty, but as two people who know the storm isn't just outside the window. Sometimes, it's the only thing keeping them from drying out completely. The beast stands slowly, as if afraid of breaking whatever moment has just passed. He turns back, softly. I hope you'll dream of something good tonight. Beauty nods. If the rain lets me. You pull the blanket up a little higher. That last line landed in your ribs. You're not sure why. Somewhere deep in the castle, a rose begins to tremble. But we'll get to that later. By now, the rhythm of the castle feels like your own heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, a little damp around the edges. You know its hallways like dreams you keep returning to. You expect the rain now. Welcome it even. It's no longer just weather. It's punctuation. Everything begins and ends with the sound of water sliding across stone and glass. Tonight dinner is different. Beauty arrives in her usual quiet way, but the table is set for a feast. Not just the usual quiet elegance. This time it's celebratory. Candlelight in chandeliers instead of sconces. Napkins folded like lilies. A harp you didn't know existed starts playing itself in the background, slow and dreamy, like it's remembering a lullaby from centuries ago. The beast is already there, seated at the far end of the long, impossibly wide table. But tonight, he stands when she enters. Not formally, just awkwardly, like someone remembering what courtesy is supposed to feel like. He gestures for her to sit at his end, just the two of them, near the fire. The rest of the grand table stretches out behind them, filled with plates that no one will touch. They eat in relative silence, but something's different. Something is shifting. The beast speaks first. You must be tired of this. Beauty sets down her fork. Of the food? He almost smiles. Of the castle. Of me. And now, you feel the tension again. Not fear. Just that ache that builds when you've been almost comfortable for too long. When you're not sure if what you feel is affection or just the absence of pain. She doesn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she asks him a question. One that seems to surprise them both. Do you ever get lonely here? The beast doesn't pretend to misunderstand. Every day. He says it plainly, without flourish or theatricality. Just the truth, served up like one of the invisible courses laid before them. This is where the story slows again. Right here, in the candlelight. With two people trying not to speak the word need too loudly in case it echoes. Here's your historical tidbit for the night. In medieval Europe, hospitality was a sacred duty. To provide food and shelter to strangers was considered a moral obligation, and sometimes a spiritual test. Monks wrote entire manuals on how to welcome guests. One even warned, "The soul of your brother may be cloaked in rags." That idea, that your visitor could be divine, echoes through Beauty and the Beast like a secret that everyone suspects, but no one wants to say aloud. So the Beast, he's not just feeding her out of politeness. He's repenting through supper, offering comfort in hopes it might transform him, one meal at a time. The quirky aside, in 18th century France, there were dinner parties so elaborate that courses were presented in allegorical themes. The Garden of Versailles, the Four Seasons, even the Realm of Dreams. Guests ate pastries shaped like clouds and drank punch from fountains designed to look like moonlight. The point was not just nourishment, it was spectacle, theater, a chance to become someone else while chewing. But this dinner, in this castle, is not spectacle. It's ritual. Every night, the same meal, the same question. And tonight, Beauty doesn't wait for him to ask. No, she says gently before he even begins. Not yet. The Beast doesn't flinch, just bows his head slightly. He doesn't seem disappointed. He seems relieved, like she's still here, and that's enough. After dinner, they walk again, but this time, not through the usual halls. He leads her through a side door she's never noticed before, down a staircase that curves like a spiral shell. The torches here don't light themselves. Instead, the fire glows from inside the walls, like veins of molten amber. They reach a low, warm room. Not grand, not magical, just familiar. A sitting room, if beasts had need for sitting. Books everywhere, but well loved. A kettle humming on its own. The furniture here doesn't speak, it listens. Beauty smiles, because this is the first room in the castle that feels like it belongs to someone real. Did you make this? She asks. The beast nods. It's not enchanted. She doesn't say, I can tell. She just sits. So does he. And for the first time, they talk about nothing. About the books. About how she misses the sound of market vendors shouting in the street. About how he used to ride horses before they stopped trusting him. They laugh once. It startles both of them. Outside, the rain falls harder, almost jealously. You feel that shift too. Like something in the castle is watching this scene and doesn't quite know what to do with it. A beast and a girl, not in love, not in fear, just present, in the middle of a storm. No spells broken, no hearts declared, just supper, just shadows, just the quiet understanding that sharing a meal is sometimes more intimate than any kiss. And somewhere behind them, a clock ticks once and then falls silent. It's the middle of the night, but the castle doesn't sleep. Not fully. It sighs. It hums. It waits. You and Beauty slip out of bed, though maybe in different ways. She pulls a shawl around her shoulders, soft wool catching at the tips of her fingers. You just adjust your blanket and let your imagination walk where she does, out through the echoing halls, into the garden that should not be there. You remember it from the mirror, don't you? The one that showed a moonlit landscape blooming under impossible skies. She opens the door, and the scent hits first. Wet stone, crushed petals, soil soaked in centuries of quiet. The garden beyond the castle is no ordinary patch of green. It's night blooming, strange, dreamy. Every flower is slightly unfamiliar, just real enough to make you question whether it ever grew in the waking world. The rain still falls here, but gently, like it respects the plant's schedules. Beauty walks barefoot. The path is warm despite the damp. Moss cushions each step. The moon above is enormous, swollen with light, even though no sky inside this spell should allow for weather this perfect. This is the castle's heart. She wanders between tall stalks of something like foxglove, but with silver edges. Vines climb, not just the walls, but into the air itself, like they've forgotten about gravity. There are fruits here that glow faintly, and when she touches one, it hums, not in sound, but in vibration. The air around it thickens. In one corner, she finds a bench that seems to have been grown, not built. A rose bush bends over it like a curtain, shielding her from view. She sits, and the garden leans in. You've heard of secret gardens before, but this one feels like it's been waiting longer than the others. Not hidden, reserved. A place made not for escape, but for revelation. Here's your historical nugget. In medieval Europe, hortus conclusus was a common motif, Latin for enclosed garden. These walled gardens symbolized purity, mystery, and sacredness. Often found in religious paintings, they were places of contemplation, associated with the Virgin Mary, divine wisdom, and secret knowledge. Beauty, sitting here under a drizzling moon, is now part of that tradition. But this garden? It's not Marian. It's beastly, wild in its order, feral in its grace. And here's the oddball detail you didn't ask for but deserve. In 17th century England, there were rumors of noctambulant gardens, plots of land said to bloom only after midnight. Cultivated by alchemists and lonely widows, these gardens supposedly attracted spirits, moths the size of teacups, and lovers doomed to meet only in dreams. No one ever proved they existed, but someone believed enough to write it down. Beauty leans her head back. The rain falls through the canopy in threads, not drops. It doesn't touch her unless invited. She thinks about the castle, about the beast, about how hard it is to feel normal in a place where chandeliers have opinions and staircases sometimes move when they think you're not looking. This garden, though, it doesn't want anything from her. It just grows. And you sink deeper. You imagine lying down among the strange flowers, letting them lean toward you, whispering secrets in plant language. Maybe you sleep better under rain when it's filtered through vines and moonlight. Eventually, the beast appears. Of course he does. Not loudly. He doesn't startle her. Just emerges from a row of trees that weren't there a moment ago. His silhouette is larger in the garden, like the plants are trying to match his shape. She doesn't rise. He doesn't sit. You found it, he says. I think it found me, she replies. He nods. It always does. They stand, well, exist, like that for a while. Not speaking, just breathing in the same damp air. And even though they're 10 feet apart, it feels closer than the armchairs by the fire. Then she asks something bold. Why show me this? He hesitates. The rain shifts direction. Because you weren't afraid to ask questions, he says. And because I hoped you'd see that not everything beautiful needs to be explained. That line? It lingers. Even for you. You start thinking of things you've tried to make sense of. Grief, love, that one dream you keep having where the staircase never ends. And maybe now you wonder if the point isn't understanding them, just seeing them, letting them grow. The beast doesn't stay long. He retreats before she can say anything else. Beauty walks back alone, but she doesn't feel alone. The path behind her curls closed, like a book shutting itself. Back in her room, she places a single flower from the garden in a glass of water. It doesn't wilt, doesn't open either. It just is. She sleeps better than she has in weeks. And outside the castle, though the rain never truly stops, the wind softens. Something is changing, but not loudly, not quickly, like vines creeping up stone when no one's watching. You wake to the sound of birds. Not many, just one, actually. A thin, lonesome note, like someone testing a flute made of glass. It echoes through the castle's corridors, bouncing off the stone like a message forgotten and rediscovered. It's morning now, or at least a version of it the castle allows. The rain has lightened into mist, so fine it doesn't fall. It hovers, suspended, like breath held in a story's pause. Beauty rises slowly. The flower from the garden still stands in the glass by her window, unchanged. She touches its petals once, just to be sure she didn't imagine the whole thing. But it's real, cool, smooth, perfect. Today, the castle feels different. Not in structure. It still shifts its staircases when it thinks she isn't looking. But in tone. The air feels warmer, the silence less heavy. Even the shadows seem to stretch a little lazily, like they're in on some slow secret. She dresses in a robe she doesn't remember choosing. It fits anyway. Down in the breakfast room, yes, there's a different room for that. There's something waiting for her. A mirror. Not just any mirror. The mirror. She knows it the moment she sees it. Oval. Framed in metal that doesn't quite hold still. One moment it's bronze, then gold, then something like moonlight reflected in water. It's lying flat on the table, like an invitation. The beast isn't here. Just the mirror and a note beside it. Ask to see what your heart longs for. Not signed. It doesn't need to be. She hesitates. You probably would too, because this isn't some party trick. This is old magic. the kind that doesn't explain itself and never arrives without a price. But she's never been one to look away from truth. So she whispers, I want to see my father. The surface of the mirror clouds, not like glass fogging, but like a storm forming beneath the surface of a lake. Then it clears. Her father appears, in his old chair, back at the little house with the squeaky gate and the overgrown herb garden. He looks thinner, grayer. He's holding a letter, eyes wet. He's murmuring her name. She stares, forgetting to breathe. Now the story takes a turn, not dramatic, not loud, just human. She misses him. Historians still argue whether this moment in Beauty and the Beast is about the limits of love or the weight of duty. Is she choosing family over romance, loyalty over enchantment? Or is this the moment she finally realizes what she values? That love without freedom isn't love at all? Whatever the interpretation, one thing is clear. She can't stay here. Not yet. Not without seeing her father. Not without letting him know she's alive. And, well, currently cohabiting with a polite, sorrowful monster in a house full of singing furniture. She finds the beast later in the Hall of Tapestries. He's standing before one she's never seen before, an image of a prince whose face is blurred, standing before a rose that's wilting in real time. I need to go home, she says gently. He doesn't turn, just nods. Of course. She watches his shoulders tense, just barely. I'll come back, she adds, before she fully knows she means it. I promise. And here's the curious little footnote for your sleepy brain. In many early versions of this tale, Beauty is allowed to leave the castle on one condition. She must return within a specific number of days, or else the beast will die. Not metaphorically, literally, as if his life is tied not just to her presence, but to her remembering him. It's the kind of curse you don't find in modern stories. Conditional, relational. Love not as rescue, but as responsibility. So the beast gives her the mirror and a ring. When you wish to return, he says, place this on your finger and turn it 3 times. No dramatic send-off. No carriage pulled by feathered lions. She simply closes her eyes and wakes up, back in her own bed, in her own home. The rain is different here. Colder, more aggressive. The sky is too loud, the wind too sharp. But everything else is exactly as she left it. The house smells like damp wool and tea gone cold. Her father, hearing her stir, rushes in. His eyes widen, his hands tremble. He says her name like it's a prayer he'd forgotten the words to. She hugs him. They sit for hours, drinking something too sweet and too hot, and she tries to explain. But how do you describe a place where the hallways breathe and a beast waits beside a fire he doesn't need? She says only this: I was safe. He believes her. You, meanwhile, are feeling a little too awake now. Because the quiet you've grown used to, the gentle pace, the hush of the castle, has been replaced by the jangle of the normal world. But don't worry, we're not staying here long. Beauty settles back into life, sort of. Her sisters are still selfish, still dramatic. The town hasn't changed. The market still sells bad bread and overpriced ribbons. The noise of it all grates against her like rough cloth. She tries to sleep one night and can't. The rain is wrong. She touches the flower from the garden, still blooming, tucked in the folds of her cloak. It smells faintly of that quiet, and she realizes what you've known since section 1. She doesn't belong here anymore. She tries to wait. Honestly, she does. 1 day becomes 2. 2 becomes nearly a week. The rain keeps coming, but it's the wrong kind. The kind that makes you cold, not calm. The kind that creeps under doors It makes your socks wet and your temper worse. Not like the rain at the castle, which knew how to hush, how to soothe. The mirror, tucked beneath her bed, offers glimpses, small ones. She doesn't want to seem obsessed. But late at night, when no one's awake, she peers into it. The castle is quieter than she remembers. In the dining hall, the table is set, but the candles don't light themselves anymore. The music has stopped. The armchair by the fire sits stiffly, its cushions untouched. The beast is nowhere to be seen. Then she finds him, in the garden. But it's not blooming now. The vines have gone limp. The moonlight that once draped everything in silver has dulled. And the beast, he's lying beneath the arch of rose branches, barely moving. She sees him lift a hand, not to wave, just to try. That's the moment she stops pretending. She runs back to her room, finds the ring, and slides it onto her finger. Turns it once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. She closes her eyes and turns it a third time. And just like that, the room sighs, folds, exhales, and she's back. The castle catches her like it's relieved. The stones warm beneath her feet. The air smells faintly of rain again, not the stormy kind, but the gentle mist that says thank you for returning. She runs, of course, through hallways that no longer shift to confuse her, past tapestries that nod ever so slightly as she rushes by, down to the garden, where the petals are falling like snow. He's still there, not dead, but close. His eyes are closed, his breathing shallow. Of course, she mutters, dropping to her knees. Of course you had to be dramatic about it. She presses her forehead to his chest, not because she knows it will work, but because she doesn't know what else to do. And then softly, he says her name. You feel that moment like a ripple across your chest, like your own heart skipped, not in panic, but in recognition. She lifts her head. He opens his eyes. You came back, he whispers. I promised, she says. He smiles. It's a weak smile, but it's real. And then he says it one last time. Will you marry me? There's a pause, but only a brief one. Yes, she says. Not because he needs rescuing. Not because she feels sorry for him, but because this place, this story, this being, they've all become something she wants to protect. The garden exhales. Something shifts. The castle, for the first time, is still. And now, here comes the part the movies always race through. But you and I, we're in no rush. We want to feel every beat of it. The beast doesn't explode in light. No beams shoot from the sky. The rain doesn't stop. What happens instead is slower. He begins to change, but not in the way you might think. His shape doesn't snap into something human like a reversed spell. It softens. His eyes become less glassy. His hands tremble less. The fur retreats slightly, not completely, as though the curse was never about how he looked, but how he felt inside his own skin. He becomes himself again. And here's your scholarly debate. In some of the oldest versions of the tale, the prince never transforms at all. He remains beastly, at least on the outside. Scholars argue whether this was to emphasize inner beauty over outward form, or if it reflected something deeper. The idea that healing doesn't erase who you were. It includes it. And the fringe detail? In a 14th century Irish folktale, there's a creature called the Gruagach, a hairy man-beast who guards sacred wells and offers blessings to those who treat him with respect. He's not a monster. He's a custodian. Maybe the beast isn't cursed at all. Maybe he was always meant to be a guardian, a keeper of strange rooms and sacred rain. Back in the garden, beauty helps him to his feet. The vines bloom again as they walk. Inside, The castle flickers back to life, not with fanfare, but with gentle relief. The chairs sit straighter. The harp plucks a lullaby by itself. The walls lean inward just slightly, like they've been bracing against silence for too long. She doesn't ask what comes next. Neither does he. They simply walk, side by side, back into the house that now knows her name. And you feel that moment stretch and settle in your chest. Because sometimes, the most powerful spell is simply being seen and welcomed back. You wake again in the castle, not as a guest anymore, but as someone who belongs. That's the difference now. Before, it tolerated you. Now, it welcomes you. Beauty moves through the halls as if they were made for her, and perhaps they were. The doors open without creak or ceremony. The light pools in exactly the places she lingers. The rain outside plays in rhythm with her footsteps. The beast, less beastly now, but not fully changed, is at her side. His features are still unusual, his hands still more paw than palm, but the stiffness is gone. He's at ease in his own body, and you realize, maybe for the first time, that transformation isn't a lightning flash. It's a slow bloom. They eat breakfast near the eastern window, the one with the best view of the forest, which now glistens with something between dew and enchantment. The trees shimmer, not from magic necessarily, but because they're being noticed. They talk and laugh, and not everything is romantic. That's the surprise, isn't it? They bicker over tea. She teases him about the way he overstirs his coffee. He insists that books should never be read at the table. They are, in short, ordinary. And that's what makes it feel like a miracle. Remember that mirror? The one she used to find her father? Today, it shows her the castle itself. Not a single room, but all of it. An aerial view, if such things exist in magical architecture. She sees light blooming from tower windows. She sees the garden glowing again, vines stretching toward the sun. She sees doors she hasn't yet opened. There are still mysteries here. Rooms she hasn't entered. Names she hasn't learned. And here's the odd, scholarly sidebar for your sleepy mind. In medieval romance literature, castles were often symbolic of the self. Each tower or chamber represented a part of the psyche: desire, memory, fear. Knights didn't just storm keeps, they explored the soul. Which means beauty isn't just living in a house. She's exploring her own heart. Later, she finds a room with no ceiling, not broken, designed that way. Rain falls straight in, but doesn't pool on the floor. It evaporates just before touching the stone. The sky above is wide and hungry. Stars blink even though it's daylight. She sits in the middle of that space, looking up. You feel her thoughts, as if they're your own. What happens now? Not happily ever after. That's not her question. It's what does a new life look like once the old one ends? Here's your quirky gem for the night. In 18th century salons, especially in France, there was a tradition called the blue hour, a time just before night when conversation was meant to turn philosophical. Light faded, candles lit slowly, and people asked questions they didn't expect to answer. This feels like one of those moments, a blue hour of the soul. Beauty asks herself, am I still me? The answer is yes, and also more. She still misses her father. She still wonders about the world outside. But the ache isn't sharp anymore. It's warm. She can feel his presence in the mirror if she needs it. The beast even suggested inviting him here. And though she laughed at the idea of her father navigating a staircase with opinions, part of her is considering it. The castle, for its part, is adjusting too. The animated objects, The dishes, the curtains, the chairs seem less frantic, as though they've been waiting too, for stability, for a stillness that doesn't come from enchantment, but from peace. That night, there's a celebration, but it's quiet. No trumpets, no parades, just the long dining table, candles flickering gently, a meal that smells like childhood and curiosity. The beast offers her a dance. She accepts. It's awkward. He's large. She's trying not to laugh at how seriously he counts each step. But somewhere between the first clumsy turn and the second, they find a rhythm. Not the kind you learn from lessons, the kind that bodies find when they trust one another. You sit back in your own bed, listening to the imagined music. A waltz, maybe. Or something older. The rain on your window keeps time with the rhythm of their steps. They don't kiss, not yet. They don't need to. Because the real magic isn't that he changed. It's that she chose to return. And that, quietly, steadily, without ceremony, the castle allowed itself to hope again. A single petal falls from the enchanted rose, not from decay, from fullness. Because even magic has a season for letting go. The rain continues soft and reliable, like a breath the castle never stops taking. You feel it now, don't you? The rhythm of the place, the way its stillness speaks louder than most people's chatter. The halls no longer creak in suspicion. They hum in contentment. Even the walls seem to lean in a little closer, not to listen, but to keep her warm. Beauty moves through her days with intention now. She's no longer exploring to find escape routes. She's curating her world, rearranging furniture in rooms no one's visited in years, teaching the mirror to show memories instead of fears, reading aloud to the armchairs and setting her tea down on tables that purr. The beast joins her more often, not always out of necessity, but out of comfort. There are moments when they exist in silence for hours. He drawing strange, dreamlike maps from memory. She tracing the ceiling's patterns with her eyes. Neither rushes. Neither fills the space with empty noise. And here's your delightful detour of the evening. During the 18th century, some aristocratic households in France employed readers in residence, people whose full-time job was simply to read aloud to the household during meals, baths, and even bedtime. A human audiobook before audiobooks existed. There are records of one such reader reciting entire works of Voltaire over several dinners, his voice becoming part of the wallpaper. In Beauty's castle, that job belongs to her now. Only the texts are stranger, older, sometimes blank until she opens them. And the beast? He listens like the words are sunlight. Tonight, though, there's a ripple in the calm. It starts small. A draft in a hallway that never had one before. A window refusing to close. The enchanted quill on her writing desk shaking slightly, like it's nervous. Beauty notices. So does the beast. They meet in the West Wing. Yes, that West Wing. The one she was once told never to enter. Only now, no one stops her. The door opens with a sigh, like it's been holding its breath for decades. Inside, the rose. Not a metaphor this time. The actual enchanted rose, suspended beneath its glass dome, glowing faintly. But it's wilting. One petal on the floor, another trembling at the edge. Why is it still dying? She asks. Not to accuse, but to understand. The beast doesn't answer. Not right away. Because, he says at last, I haven't forgiven myself. The line lands heavy. Not for her. For you. You start to realize this was never a curse about punishment. It was about remorse. The enchantment didn't need someone to love him. It needed him to believe he was lovable. Historians still argue whether this part of the tale, the magical deadline, the dying rose, was a metaphor for a man's ego or a woman's ticking clock. Was it about worth or time? One theory even suggests that the rose was inspired by the concept of memento mori, a reminder of mortality meant to keep one humble. But maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's about the things we love most, losing petals, until we care for them properly. Beauty touches the glass. The rose responds, just slightly. Its glow steadies. Then let's forgive you, she says, not a command, an invitation. The beast looks at her with something like surprise, and awe, and fear, like someone who's just been told they might be allowed to wake up. Do you? He whispers. I do, she replies, because I know what it feels like to carry shame for something no one else remembers, and because I don't want to wait for love to fix it. The moment hangs there, thick with possibility. The candlelight stretches. The castle holds its breath. Then he lifts the glass dome. No fanfare. No transformation. Just the scent of the rose growing stronger. You ever notice how healing doesn't feel like a breakthrough? More like a deep exhale. That's what this is. A soft moment. A tiny choice. A nearly invisible shift from guilt to grace. The rose doesn't bloom again. It simply stops dying, and that's enough. Later, they sit in the corridor of mirrors again. Some now show clear images, snapshots of their new routines. Beauty reading aloud on the terrace. The beast asleep in the garden. A kitchen that seems busier, even though no staff are visible. One mirror, though, remains misted. She asks about it. I don't know, the beast says. It's never shown anything. She stares into it anyway. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's waiting. You think of your own life, of all the mirrors that refused to show you what you wanted. And maybe now you wonder if they weren't hiding. Maybe they were reflecting your uncertainty. Maybe they, too, were waiting for you to stop demanding and start witnessing. Tonight, the rain returns in earnest. Not sad, not angry, just steady, like punctuation at the end of a well-crafted sentence. The castle dims its lights, the fireplace hums, and you, curled in your own bed, let the image of the rose, still glowing, still fragile, settle behind your eyes. Because forgiveness is not a finale, it's a flickering flame, and you've kept it lit this long. You wake to silence, not the kind that feels empty or eerie, but the thick, velvety kind, the kind that wraps around your ears and says, shh, you're safe. No need to rush. The rain has stopped. For the first time since you entered this castle, through your ears, through your imagination, through whatever dream layer lets you visit places, stories build brick by brick. The rain has stopped. The sky beyond the windows is pale, washed clean. Not quite sunny, but trying. A soft, diffused light spreads across the floors like butter melting slowly across warm bread. The castle feels lighter. Beauty notices it too. She walks the halls with bare feet and loose hair, her posture unguarded, her thoughts unspoken. She lingers longer in doorways, smiles more easily at the quiet quirks of the house. Even the furniture seems to stretch. The chairs no longer lean toward her as if starving for company. The candles no longer flicker with worry. The beast, he has a name now. She's said it, softly, but we won't share it yet. It's still tender, still healing. A name given back after years of absence is like a sapling newly planted, fragile, precious, not ready for too much light. They've fallen into rhythm, these two. Their days are quieter now, full of ritual and little acts of care. Breakfast with marmalade and silence. Mornings, reading from old books whose language shifts when you look away. Afternoons spent restoring broken things. Clocks that no longer tick. Locks that no longer turn. Beauty learns how to mend with gold-laced thread, a technique the beast says came from a land long forgotten, where scars were honored instead of hidden. Here's your unusual historical gem. In 15th century Japan, there was a philosophy called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. The cracks weren't disguised. They were highlighted, made more beautiful. This practice spread slowly west, influencing a fringe community of artisans in France who called themselves les réparateurs. They applied gold to broken mirrors, shattered combs, even worn-out shoes. The idea? Nothing truly precious is ever ruined, only reshaped. And that's what you're watching now. Two people reshaping a life, not rewriting, not scrubbing out the beastliness or the fears or the long stretches of lonely silence, just choosing to stay, choosing to tend to each other's fractures with patience. In one room, they paint, not well, but joyfully, smearing color over forgotten walls, blues too deep to be real, greens pulled straight from impossible vines. She paints a bird with antlers. He adds clouds that look like sleeping cats. Another day, they find a forgotten attic, full of old shoes, musty capes, letters never sent. Beauty holds up one and reads it aloud. To whoever reads this, the castle was kind today? I hope you are too. Neither says a word, but they keep the letter, tuck it into a book, like a pressed flower. You want them to kiss, don't you? But they don't. They don't need to. Their affection now is quieter, shared glances, passing a cup of tea before the other asks, a hand brushing another's sleeve, and lingering just a second longer than it needs to. The slow, sure work of building something that doesn't demand validation, just endurance. And here's the scholarly question that never gets answered. Is this story a love story or a survival story? Historians still argue whether Beauty and the Beast was meant to teach girls about devotion or about discernment. Some claim it was a cautionary tale. Learn to love the ugly parts of life because they're what will keep you safe. Others argue it was radical for its time, about seeing past fear, about a woman choosing her own pace, her own terms, her own return. Maybe it's both. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're both still here, still showing up. Even the rose agrees. It hasn't bloomed again, but it hasn't dropped another petal either. It simply glows, faintly, steadily, like a heartbeat in a dark room. Tonight, they eat dinner on the roof. Yes, the roof. There's a flat section above the west tower where the stars feel close enough to touch and the rain never puddles. The floor is warm beneath their feet, and a single lantern floats in midair, bobbing gently like a firefly, too lazy to blink. They bring bread, cheese, wine neither of them can pronounce. They don't toast. They just eat and look up. And you? You're watching them from the soft comfort of your own blanket, your own rain-streaked window. Maybe imagining that warm rooftop under a sky that feels big enough to hold everything you've ever worried about. You feel your body slow down, not out of exhaustion, out of peace. Because this is the part of the story most versions skip, the quiet middle after the battle, after the transformation, before the final chapter. The part where normal begins to feel like magic again, where two people, bruised and blooming, sit beneath the stars and let themselves be. Nothing broken, Nothing fixed, just whole. The days pass, not in dramatic plot points, but in gentle, repeating cycles. The castle is settled. So has beauty. So has the beast. You notice it in the way the morning light falls through the same stained glass windows, casting soft colors on the floor like old lullabies. In the way the fire crackles in the sitting room without being asked. In how the house no longer tries to impress or perform. It simply is. There's comfort in repetition, isn't there? The soft predictability of a shared life. They wake, they read, they wander, they laugh at jokes neither of them finishes. They hold each other's silences like the handles of delicate teacups. Sometimes they argue, not dramatically, but real disagreements about where the tea should go, about whether a certain chair is haunted or just overly affectionate. The castle listens politely, creaking when it agrees, huffing when it doesn't. One day, Beauty finds a door she's never seen before. Of course she opens it. It leads to a chamber full of clocks, hundreds of them, all ticking, none in sync. The beast finds her there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by time that doesn't seem to care for order. She looks up. "Are these all yours?" He shrugs. "They were. I've forgotten what most of them were supposed to track." You watch as she winds one. It begins to chime. Slow, deep, like a bell in a far-off city. The sound fills the room, echoes through the hallways, ripples down the staircase like water finding its level. The castle feels it too. And then he says it, not as a question, but as a truth gently offered. It's time. Beauty doesn't ask for what. She just nods. They walk together, out of the clock room, through the halls, past the garden that now blooms with soft, rain-slick petals, and vines that don't need tending, past the library that still smells like cedar and stories, up to the West Tower. There on the balcony, beneath a sky bruised with lavender clouds, she places her hand over his, and she says it again. Yes. Not in response to a question, in recognition of a choice. You might expect fireworks now, lightning, a voice from the heavens announcing a happily ever after. But that's not how magic ends. Not real magic. The beast closes his eyes, and then, slowly, softly, his form begins to shift. Not like melting, not like exploding, like remembering. His features grow clearer, not prettier. His skin smooths, but some of the fur remains along his arms, faint and soft as velvet. His eyes, though, his eyes never change. The same gaze that watched her walk through storms and mirrors. The same sadness, now tempered by hope. Beauty doesn't flinch. She touches his cheek, and the wind stills. And then the castle exhales. Windows bloom with light. The towers straighten. The chairs laugh. The chandelier in the dining hall sings a single note in joy. Far below, in the gardens, the rose blooms. Not all at once, but petal by petal. Not like a deadline met, but like a promise kept. Here's your final historical fact. In ancient Persian mythology, there was a belief that true transformation required the union of opposites. That healing came not from conquering the beast or banishing the beauty, but in merging them. In becoming both soft and strong, wild and wise. That's what this ending is. Not one becoming the other, but both choosing to grow. And for your last little oddity of the night, in the 19th century, a forgotten French folktale was discovered in the margins of a religious text. It was short, just one paragraph. A girl, a monster, a house of rain. It ended with, and they never left. Because some stories aren't escapes, their homes. So that's where we leave them, not galloping into the sunset, not waving goodbye, just staying, building a life in a house that once held a curse and now holds warmth. Because this story wasn't about a spell, it was about staying and choosing to stay again, even after the rain. So now, the castle dims. The rain, so much a part of this journey, has faded into mist again, gentle, rhythmic, familiar. You lie still, eyes soft, thoughts quiet. You've traveled far, not in miles, but in memory, in myth, through mirror halls and enchanted gardens, along winding staircases that sighed beneath your steps. You've watched love grow not in bursts, but in the slow, deliberate way moss climbs stone, quiet, persistent, inevitable. Let yourself rest in that. The idea that stories don't have to be loud to be powerful, that comfort doesn't come from fireworks or finality, but from routine, kindness, a hand held in silence. The beast was never truly cursed. He was just waiting for someone to see him and stay. And beauty? She was never captive. She was always choosing, again and again. You've felt the castle breathe with you. You've listened to its walls whisper. You've seen how even the loneliest places can bloom again, with patience. And now, you get to carry that quiet with you, into your sleep, into tomorrow, into the world, which may not have enchanted teapots or talking roses, but still holds pockets of wonder, still holds spaces where rain sounds like music and someone waits beside a fire for your return. So take a deep breath, sink into the softness, and let the story hold you a little longer. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.